Very excited about this session because of the local, regional and global look that it will have. It's really a great pleasure to welcome on behalf of AMEC, Jeff Kuhlman, Vice President, Global Communications, Nissan Motor Company, based in Japan. And Jeff, by way of context, is one of the world's foremost communications professionals working in the automotive industry. He's passionate about the use of research and measurement, and that will come out. And he's going to be joined by two colleagues who are on stage. Catherine Zachary, General Manager, Corporate and Electric Vehicles Communications, based in Switzerland. Welcome, Catherine. And Francesc Corbero-Vinyals, Communications Director for Nissan Iberia. Welcome back, because Francesc was with us 2 years ago. I'm going to hand over to Jeff because you know how you want the session to run. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. Thank you for the invitation to join you today and to tell you about a journey that we're taking on bringing measurement to Nissan. Because the last thing that I want to do is come into a room full of experts on measurement and tell you how to do measurement. It's fairly intimidating. My personal journey with measurement goes back a fair number of years when I was first with General Motors. And I've been enthralled with the idea of how measurement can influence our business strategy. And we've recently brought it to Nissan, and I want to share with you this journey that we've been on. And when we were talking about the subject of the conference, that's when it hit upon me that it would be a waste for me to come up by myself and not bring some colleagues who can take measurement down to the regional level and to the country level. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to tell you about our journey to bring measurement into Nissan. I joined Nissan back in 2011, moving to Yokohama, Japan at the start of 2012. And when I arrived there, it was fairly obvious to me that we had some issues within communication. We had a real imbalance between the regions and the headquarters. And by that I mean regions were largely doing what they wanted. Headquarters was kind of isolated. And it was very different from the type of organizations that I had worked in previously, where strategy was sent from the top down and then localized at the region and the global level. But quite frankly, that wasn't all that I noticed. We didn't have a strong narrative in the company. And quite frankly, you would experience the company in very different ways depending on where you encountered it. So if you were in the UK, you would see a very different Nissan than you might see in the US, than you might see in Australia. So we had a big disconnect going on in the organization. And as I was thinking about the challenges that we might have before us, I also started to think about, well, how does the consumer think about Nissan? Now, you're a global audience. When I say, what does Nissan mean? I mean, what comes to your mind? I suspect very different things. And in fact, when we started to look at the data, very different things did come to people's minds. Maybe people thought about a Nissan that they once owned. Maybe they thought about one that a friend or a family member has or used to have. Maybe you thought about our electric vehicle. We sell more in the world than anyone else, something we like to be known for. But what really worries me is when people have no image of Nissan. And in fact, that was pretty much what we struck upon a few years ago, was recognizing that Nissan didn't have a clear image in people's minds. And that really added to the issue of this disconnect that was going on within communication, and I would extend that to marketing as well. We were, in media terms, not in the conversation. We weren't being reported on. We weren't being approached for our opinion on issues and subjects and on technology and on the issues of the industry as much as our aspirations would have expected us to. We really had no image at all. And when I talk about what our aspirations were, we put together a very simple graph that related share of voice to market share. And we said, if we draw this line between market share and share of voice, what do we find out? And what we found out was that companies on the line basically are getting the type of coverage that you would expect for most companies. Their market share and their share of coverage was about the same. So if they weren't doing anything extraordinary, they were getting about an equal amount of coverage. If you're below the line, you're not doing much to raise the profile of your company. And if you're above the line, you were basically earning an unfair share of coverage. You were getting more coverage than your market share would dictate. So the question was, why in 2012 was Nissan below the line? I have to say that part of it, I believe, is about our culture. I think most people would recognize Japan is a country and a nation that has grown into an economic powerhouse. It was built on engineering and manufacturing largely, and what it wasn't built on was PR and marketing. At Nissan, and I don't think this is unique to Nissan, in marketing, communication, HR, employees rotated through these departments, through these functions, on a fairly regular basis. They weren't seen as professions. And so they didn't have an expectation of a career in these areas. And this is kind of where you get the traditional salaryman. He's on his journey through his career, and 35 years later, he comes out and retires. We were one of those destinations in that career. Someone was coming in for 2 or 3 years, and their expectation was that they might go on to planning, or they might go on to HR, or another department, but they probably weren't expecting to stay in communication. Very much unlike what we saw in engineering, in design, and in manufacturing. In fact, there isn't even really a word in the Japanese language that can be used for public relations or for marketing. They have to use a special alphabet to form those words. In the modern Japanese corporation, the engineers and the designers were the samurai. And the samurai were the ones that set the moral and ethical code of society. Communications, PR, marketing were the merchants. And the merchants were those people who made money but without making anything. They were at the lower end of the social spectrum. And that's where I think we found marketing and communication not too many years ago inside of Nissan. So how to move it up the social ladder. Unfortunately, that cultural issue also led us to another issue, and that was what I alluded to earlier, and that was this divide between our regions and our headquarters. Because we had so many employees moving through communication on a regular basis that didn't really see it as a career, the regions that had been building professional communication teams led by senior professionals in the business didn't see a value or a value add from the headquarters. And that created a big gap between the headquarters and the regions. And what we found was that the regions were doing a much better job of communication. They were doing a much better job of presentation. They were also moving with the times. They recognized the trends that were happening with news media, and they moved along with it. My first day at Nissan in Japan, a colleague walked by me with a stack of papers, and I said, where are you going? And he said, oh, I'm taking these down to the press club. I have to pass these out. And he was literally going down to the press club to fill the cubby holes with the press releases. The next day, same colleague walked by with a piece of paper. I said, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm going to fax this. I was like, wait a minute, we've got a fax machine? In this day and age, 2012, we're faxing to journalists press releases. In 2012, Catherine Francesque, were you faxing anything to anybody?
I'm way too young to fax, clearly.
But that was the situation that existed between the regions and the headquarters. So I knew we had some work to do. So where did we start? First place was to set a challenge. The challenge that we set was, let's get into the conversation. Let's get people at least recognizing that Nissan is out there. Let's make sure that our cars are getting reviewed when a competitor car is being launched. Because if we're not even in that conversation, if we're not a benchmark against these other cars, we've lost already. Diligent application of our practice, hopefully we can get into influencing the conversation. How could we help shape the conversation? And eventually, how do we turn our organization into an organization that's actually creating the conversation? People are looking to Nissan to lead the conversation. That was the challenge we set. But the question was, could we take on that challenge? And so we did an organizational assessment working with Ketchum Change Group, where we looked at four factors, or we focused on 4 areas. We focused on strategic effectiveness, operational effectiveness, professional effectiveness, and operational effectiveness. So basically, strategy, how are we linked to the organization's goals? Operational, do we have the tools and the methods in place to be able to support this challenge? Professional, what are we doing to bring our core competency up, to have career paths for individuals? How are we recruiting? And then organizationally, how are we working as a team inside of headquarters? How are we working between headquarters and the region? And how are we working with other functions within the business, let alone how are we working with people outside of the business, with media? I can tell you that the results of the assessment were tough to read. They confirmed some of my gut feel on what was going on within the organization. And I guess for the purposes of our discussion here, when we looked at measurement, it probably wouldn't surprise you to know that we had all kinds of measurements. We had basically every mutation of measurement that there was. We had in places no measurement. In some places we had the clips thud factor. What was the sound of what was the noise of the clips when they hit the desk if you dropped them from 10 feet? We had AVE in place. And we had, in some places, sophisticated measurement. So nothing was common. So the first task was we needed a single measurement system that helped guide us to the goals that we had set forward. We went through the typical process of assessment, and we partnered with Prime, who we've been working with now since 2013, I believe, is when we actually started. And we started to roll out the survey and the tool of the Prime survey. It's taken us about 2 years to get it in place through about 85% of our organization. Again, if you go, excuse me, if you go back and you think about the challenge or the situation that I laid out a minute ago, where we had no measurement to clippings to AVE to sophisticated, we had a big challenge. So we had to get the tool out there. We had to train people, let alone, and I think anyone on the agency side will appreciate this, a big company's purchasing department came into play. And I can tell you that as much as you hate working with purchasing, we do too. So it's taken us a while to just get the tool in place and to train the team on how to use the tool. It was a big challenge. We still have, as I said, some unfinished business, but we're on the path to 100%, I hope, by the end of this year of having the measurement in place. The next step was, how do we link what we do in communication to the business plan of Nissan? So Nissan's midterm business plan, which was laid out in 2011 and will conclude in March of 2017, it's called Nissan Power 88. And the 88 stands for 8% market share, global market share, and 8% sustainable corporate operating profit. So very clear goals, very easy to measure. The question for us was, how do we link what communication does to the strategy of the company? Because I can tell you that the discussion that I have with my CEO when I sit down with him, he doesn't ask me how many tweets we did. He doesn't want to know how many likes we have on Facebook. What he wants to know is, how is communication helping achieve the goals of the business? One of the drivers of Power 88 is brand power. And the idea here is that in addition to the corporate operating profit and in addition to the market share goal, the other driver is to grow brand power, to grow the Nissan Motor Company image, to grow Nissan brand, Datsun brand, and the Infiniti brand. We're convinced that if we focus on overall opinion from a marketing communication perspective, we can influence and help drive the accomplishment of Power 88. And so what we did, working with Prime and with Ketchum, we looked at the drivers of overall opinion. So another member of the extended team is Interbrand. We've been working with Interbrand for a number of years on this concept of overall opinion and driving it through the organization. And we looked at how communication influences, what elements of overall opinion can communication influence. We identified those. And we were able to draw a straight line from our communication activity through the elements of OAO through to Power 88. It's the first time that anyone in Nissan was able to draw a straight line from the strategy of communication to the strategy of the company. And it gave us, I think, a big seat at the table. In addition to making the connection to the business plan, we needed to set some KPIs for ourselves in communication. And so again, working with Prime, we took a look at the historical performance of Nissan from a share of coverage and from a tone of coverage perspective. And when we did the assessment, we found that if we were to apply these ideas of getting into the conversation and eventually generating the conversation, and some of the things that I'll talk about in a minute, we had a belief that we could attain top 5 in share of coverage relative to our direct competitors. So by that I would say Volkswagen, General Motors, Ford, Hyundai, Fiat Chrysler. So the list is 7 to 8 companies, big companies. So we could be in the top 5 of those on a sustainable basis, and We felt with the product lineup that we had, the technologies that we were going to be launching in the, during the midterm plan, that attaining number one tone of voice was achievable as well. So we set those as our KPIs. Those dictate my pay, so I'm incredibly attached to it. And it's a way for me to also have a conversation with our CEO when I sit down with him during our one-on-ones each month. I'm able to review with him our performance, our progress towards these goals, our progress in helping to drive OAO. And I think the other thing is that he latched onto this pretty significantly. And as we dug into the data, he recognized his value to driving the image of Nissan. Now, for those of you who know the CEO of Nissan Motor Company, he's a bit larger than life. He's regularly one of the top spokespeople in the industry. But nobody had really drawn him the picture previously. So, thank you. So, in bringing measurement to him, he saw the power that his own personality brought to moving Nissan towards its goals. Then, we've made the connection to the business plan. We've rolled measurement out across the organization. The next piece was we needed to work on how we talked about ourselves. And we're looking around for how can we position Nissan to be different than everyone else. And the thing that we struck upon was the idea of challenge convention. So if you understand that idea, it's that you don't go the way everyone else goes just because that's the way everyone else goes. At the same time, you don't challenge convention just for the sake of challenging convention. You don't do things differently just to do them differently, but you're looking at that as a power within your strategy. It's why we think we can have a Leaf, an all-electric zero-emission Leaf, and a 2.6 second 0 to 60 GTR supercar that costs $100,000. We think challenge convention is borne out when you look at our business strategy, which is an alliance with Renault that has lasted for 15 years. No one else has been able to do that. We've got a very diverse management team, and we're bringing forward very interesting technologies that are going to launch over the next few years. We thought that challenge convention was a way to position Nissan. We would maybe never say challenge convention, but we would use that attitude in presenting the company. Just interestingly, Game Changer is up there because when we started to have this conversation, the Japanese colleagues didn't understand challenge convention. And I couldn't understand why for 6 months we couldn't get the team to move forward and start to think about how we would exercise challenge convention. And Japanese tend to be more reserved. They don't speak out right away. But finally, I had to sit down and say, what's holding us back? And somebody finally came through my door one day and said, Jeff-san, we don't understand. We had worked basically 6 months and we hadn't listened. So after another month of really working it through, we came upon the idea of Game Changer, which was something that connected well with the Japanese colleagues. Just a small note on listening within your organization when you're trying to push big change through. Finally, before I turn it over to Catherine and Francesc, the other part that we needed to drive, so one was challenge convention, what would be the attitude we present, but the other part was how do we bring people into Nissan? How do we attract them to our story? We struck upon this idea of remarkable. And remarkable is a great word in the English language, and then it has two meanings. One, it means I'm so fascinated I have to pay attention. That's remarkable. And the other is I'm so fascinated that I have to tell somebody about it. That's remarkable. And there's a whole You can go to YouTube and you can look up his writings, but Seth Godin is the one who advanced this idea of remarkable. He also talks about purple cows and things like that, so if you're interested in purple cows, he can explain all these things about remarkable. But the idea is that whatever we present, the way that we present it, needs to be in such a way that people take notice right away, and they take notice and are so fascinated that they want to pass that along to others. And so this is the first part of the journey that we've been on, is recognizing that we weren't working as a team, recognizing that we lacked the tools and the sophistication of a global top 500 organization, that there were ways for us to improve what we were doing. Measurement was an important part of helping to bring the team together and give them a focus, and to help the organization understand that communications can contribute. And we made a direct link to the business strategy. So what I'd like to do now is, with this idea of challenge convention and remarkable, is turn it over to Catherine and Francesca so that they can tell you about how they're doing it at the regional level here in Europe and at the local level in Iberia. So Catherine?
So at Nissan in Europe, we just love measurement. If there is a way to slice and dice our data, we do it, and we report it. We report it to our teams, we report it to our bosses, we report it to our leadership, we report it to the guy sitting over there. We just keep reporting it. And that, I think, has its roots in what Jeff was talking about, which is that engineering DNA. It's like we can put math against something. We're gonna do that. So in communications, measuring results, absolutely core to what we do, because it allows us to turn this. I love this slide, it just keeps going. Into this. Now that's Nissan language. And in Europe, measurement has allowed us to speak the language of the company. So speaking the same language gives us more visibility throughout the organization. It gives us better integration with functions whose results are way more easily quantified than ours, like how many electric cars did you sell in Sweden? It's gotten the company speaking our language too. You know, we're finally seeing the words share a voice up there on like a vehicle launch, like as a primary objective, right along next to sales and profit. So the good part is that thanks to measurement, we're getting more notice. So where's the bad? Yeah, we're getting more notice. Company-wide results are counted monthly. So PR gets quantified monthly as well. And problem is some months are just down months. So take April, for example. This is my big ouch slide. I think everyone gets the concept of red being bad and green being good. Usually if there's one red dot on the slide, you go into emergency alarm bell meetings and you have red dot meetings, right? So sometimes when you're not in the news cycle, having that spotlight on you internally, not so great. But this continues to be something we grapple with. So looking at past performance, yeah, that clearly makes us more accountable, but using the data to inform the future planning is really where our focus should be right now in the company. So I'm going to share with you a couple of examples. Nissan in Europe's big accomplishment last year from a sales and marketing perspective was the creation of a 3-year plan. Now, we all joke that it's called the 3-year plan because it took us 3 years to create the plan, but that's what it felt like. In actuality, it allows us to set the communications direction far past our typical 1-year cycles. So we used our measurement data to inform and predict where we should be putting the attention in the future. And for a PR perspective, these 2 coverage themes emerged for us: crossovers and electric vehicles. So in crossovers, that's our Qashqai, our Juke, and our X-Trail. I hope you all know those cars. Nissan leads the segment in perception and coverage. So crossovers also provide the bulk of coverage for all Nissan products. And then finally, the data showed us that if we talk about our crossovers as a set of cars instead of the Qashqai, the Juke, and the X-Trail, our coverage is stronger, both in tonality and volume. So electric cars are still punching far above their weight in terms of coverage relative to overall sales. You may have heard Jeff just say this, but it bears repeating. The electric Nissan Leaf is the best-selling electric car in the world. But competition is getting super fierce, and even more so in the media spotlight than in the marketplace. We are the #1 selling electric car. We're not always #1 in the media. So our data validated our desire to keep stressing the importance of this. So with all this information, our ability to plan further into the future took shape, and it made it easier for us to link up with marketing. They use overall opinion data to sync up our efforts and hopefully really amplify our results. So today, our need to future gaze in the automotive industry has never been stronger. The future, this sounds like a very big statement, but the future of mobility is on the cusp of this huge change with the advent of autonomous drive vehicles. Nissan's committed to being a leader in the autonomous drive vehicle space. So have a lot of our competitors. But from a communications perspective, this really is the unknown. So how do we talk about cars that aren't necessarily driven? What language do we use to introduce a completely new technology? And how will the motoring media, those are those guys who just like really love to drive and the faster the better. How are they going to write about cars that give a lot more input to the driver's experience? We have no idea. But looking at the growth in conversation, we better be prepared. So you'll see a couple in spikes in conversation about autonomous drive cars. One was in August 2013. That's when we announced our intentions to get into the space. And then one was last summer when our CEO, Carlos Ghosn, outlined some details of the initiative. Communications really hit a fever pitch, though, around the Consumer Electronics Show, where we began seeing the convergence of electronics and transportation in media coverage. And for us, this appears to indicate a shift. So we're closely tracking what's being said in the press right now to help us find answers to our questions. And so we can give the organization a 360-degree view of the landscape. It's actually going into the planning process. What we know so far is there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of uncertainty. A little bit about autonomous drive and where it's going. The field is crowded. A lot of companies, not just car companies, a lot of companies are opting into this. Timing's uncertain. Everyone says they want in. No one's really saying when. There's a lot of new words flying around. I mean, autonomous drive, what does that mean? People assume driverless cars. That's not always the case. It's confusing. People don't know those words. Progress is incremental. This is a huge shift to the industry. But it comes through baby steps and incremental technology being added onto cars. So how do you talk about that? We know all this regulatory scrutiny is coming. So the data is helping us see how the media are framing the conversation about autonomous drive, and this lack of clarity represents where the opportunity is. So as we get closer to launching the technology, we're going to rely on that data to learn how to talk about a truly complex topic in a way that's simple and easily conveys the benefits of autonomous drive vehicles. So in years from now, when I'm standing next to a slide with a lot of different colored dots on it and got my bosses in front of me, we hope, because of this data, that the dots next to our autonomous drive will be green. So with that, I'll hand it over to Francesc Corbero to give the local perspective.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, let's see. Let's see how we use measurement systems in Spain, and let's see how we break silos in order to be consistent from local, regional, and local communication within Nissan. I'm faster than the button. Okay, the challenge we faced was how to maintain our crossover leadership in Spain. And it was a huge challenge because we came from this leadership, and in 2014, we launched, and to maintain this crossover leadership, we need, I'm going to explain very fast in four very simple steps. What we need to have is a good product proposal, a customer knowledge, an action plan, and for sure data analysis to see if this action plan is running as we expect in order to achieve our targets, our objectives. Let's see the step number one, a good proposal. Nissan was creating the crossover segment in the car industry in 2007 when we launched the first Qashqai. But as I said, in 2014, we launched the second Qashqai, a new model, much more sporty, full of technology, technology for security, technology for communication. But this product was totally aligned with our brand promise, which is innovation and excitement for everyone. But a part of maintaining this crossover leadership, we also need to reinforce our product positioning in the market. It's not the same positioning the Qashqai or the Juke or the X-Trail, which is the range of crossover cars we have. The second step is to know our customers, what their expectations, but also not only the customers, but the potential customers. Let's see what they are expecting from our proposal, our product proposal. Some of them trust in a company that remember their name after 5 months when they buy the car. Some of them are finding or looking for a car which achieve or which delivers the space, the roominess they need to carry on every single weekend, all the kids and all the stuff that they have to carry on. We need to do something for those customers. The next step is the action plan. The KPIs we have, the objectives we have every single year are clearly challenging, but it's possible to achieve those if we planify a little bit. We started, as I said, at the early 2014 with the launch of the new Qashqai, but we need to, not just to prepare the launch of the new car, but to maintain along the year 1 year of full communication plan. This is why we need those tools to understand how we're going to introduce the car in the market, but more than this, how we're going to communicate this car, this product, also the brand, to any one of our stakeholders. Finally, step number 4 is data analysis. I thank you, Prime, and I thank you, Acceso, also a Spanish company, who help us every single day in our job to understand which is the output media we generate, which is the gap between this output media we generate or the positive trends of communications we try to create, and which are the customer expectations also, in order to understand if the action plan is the right one or not. Let's see how these 4 steps supporting our strategy to maintain crossover leadership in 2014. These were the cover pages we have at the launch of the new Qashqai in 2014. That means that, for sure, we have a very good product. We also have the credibility in front of the media. We also create, for sure, a very positive trend of communication about the car. But as I said, we have to maintain this for a long year, for 1 year. And that means that we have to do much more than just the launch of the product in order to maintain this share of voice. What we did was to use all of the data we have. And we need teams focused in how to use this data. It's not enough just to receive every single week, day, or month a very nice report from any agency. This kind of documents, this kind of reports, it doesn't matter if you keep it in your laptop or you just print it and put it in your table. You really need a team focused in how to use this data in order to manage the action plan. You can see here, for instance, which was our releases along the year regarding the crossover leadership, which was the share of voice we get any single month from the beginning of our fiscal year until the end, and also which was the coverage for the media along the year. All of this data, well managed, well used, well analyzed every single month, allowed us to adapt our action plan, and we must be flexible to understand which is the trend of the communication or the trend of the customers in order to react immediately after and be there. But the professionals always want to go a little bit further in that kind of analysis. I thank Sergi Guillot, CEO of Acceso, who is here with us, because some time ago we decided to go together for an investigation, an analysis, to go a little bit further on what the current measurement systems we get in order to understand how PR is impacting, is influencing in any single customer in their purchase decision. It was very important for us because, as you probably know, we fight several times with our marketing colleagues in order to see who is winning the battle in the customer, in the market. And we finally just want to demonstrate ourselves that thanks to the digital world we are living today and the access to amount of information that we have, it is possible to go a little bit further and see in the different touch points we have with the customers how communication is impacting any one of the customers and how we can manage this influence in order to move them in the purchase funnel closer to the final purchase decision and finally, of course, to buy a Nissan. This was an experiment, and this was the data. But PR is not just press releases. We need also to create these positive trends of communication, and events are clearly an asset in communication. As much innovative you can be in your presentations, in your launches of your new products, for sure you will create a positive mindset in the journalists, in the influencers, the ones who are going to communicate the rest of the public opinion. This is why we make things bold, like this one. No, it's a juke in the ice, but not without wheels. With this kind of, I don't know how to say that in English. Sorry, because I had just 150 words to explain my things in English. I missed that word, sorry. But this is the question. We must be bold any single time, really, to achieve what we want to achieve. Finally, those was the results we get at the end of fiscal year 14 for us. As you know, we are a Japanese company. We start the year on the 1st of April, and we end the year on the 31st of March. We became the first Asian brand in the crossover range of brands in Spain. But more than this, we achieved to be the #1 further than the Asian brands. We also get this 20.3% share of voice, which is higher, respect the market share we have in this particular segment. We achieve also a very good favorability of 31%. Of course, we can increase much more, but positive favorability of 31%, it's quite huge. And finally, Qashqai, which is one of the most important models we sell in the European market, becomes the first crossover car. In the same trend, Europe becomes first Asian brand in crossover leadership. This is why we can work together from global, regional, and local, really to achieve our targets. If we work with the same kind of tools, if we talk, as Catherine said, the same language, and all our teams take responsibility of the tools we gave them in order to use it and to prepare the best plan. Well, just final conclusions or lessons learned from our experience in Iberia. It's very simple, but be bold and proactive. Don't wait, things happen. Do the things and let the things happen because you did it. Be smart using data resources. There is a lot of good information over there, but we have time to analyze this and to use it. Be innovative. We need much more share of voice. This is the battle of share of voice. Everybody wants his piece of cake, and we need to go further on that. Be flexible to adapt your plans. The plan is very nice. When you establish the plan at the beginning of the year, it's perfect. But then after, you must be flexible on that, consistent in your brand promise. You cannot fail on that. And finally, be quick in your decisions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Thanks to our speakers. Who's got the first question? Fascinating campaign.
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really helpful. I was wondering if you could talk about how you've been able to prove the correlation between share of voice to market share. That's one question that we ask ourselves as an industry, and I was just curious your perspective. Sorry, it's Michelle Murray, National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
Great question. It goes back, and I didn't bring any of the analysis that we did, but we did actually do a thorough analysis, and we had a correlation that was very valid. I don't even remember the number. It's been 3 years now, but well, we did a number of trials on it, and it worked out. So even if it hadn't worked out, it was a great communication tool with the CEO and the executive staff. It just was very visual for them. But fortunately, there was also a high correlation, so it worked.
Thank you.
Hi.
I think the next question.
Yes.
I think we've got a microphone.
Here? Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay.
Juan, we work for Buo in Colombia, South America, and I have a question about integration. I also have 150 words in English, so I hope to be clear. How do you deal with a global company that has different providers of measurement around the world? I understand you have different providers for this measurement, or is it the same provider around? And how do you bring everybody on? Because again, as you said, we don't get you. At some point, we don't understand what you're saying. How do you get the whole organization to be talking this language?
Sure. So we have one provider. It's Prime. Prior to 2013, we had many providers, and in some places, no providers. So the first thing was to have one common measurement system that would allow us to have basically an apples-to-apples comparison. We needed that. We had to have that for just to be able to be serious within the organization and to present our information in such a way that I think Catherine alluded to. It's an engineering-driven, finance-driven organization, so they really focus on numbers, and we needed those. I didn't wrap up because we had gone long, but so I'll include this here. So the setting of 5 and 1 was actually a strategy to help the team learn to use measurement. Our next step, and I said this is a journey, we're just out of the blocks right now. We've got a long way to go. Our next step, in my opinion, is that we've got to go from focusing on 5 and 1 to focusing on a campaign strategy model. And my belief is that if we focus on the campaign strategy where you have a hard date, start date, a hard end date, you have identified audience, identified key messages, you have an expected outcome at the end, then I'm not going to worry about 5 and 1, because 5 and 1 will take care of itself. But what I want to teach the team to do is to use measurement to influence their strategy and focus on shorter duration campaigns over the course of a year and build those into their KPIs. And if we do that, I have little doubt, and if we do it with rigor, I have little doubt that we'll exceed at the 5 and 1.
I'll take one more question. Please put your hands up. Oof. Okay.
Hi there, thanks so much. I enjoyed your presentation. Mo Farley from Microsoft. I wondered if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about your reporting, and you had a lot of disparate things, and how you communicated this change to different levels within the organization. So you talked about the CEO and exec staff, but it sounds like, like us, we're matrixed. And so, how did you streamline that process, and how do you use reporting, and what do you share to kind of the C-suite? Is there, levels of that through the organization?
Yeah. So when we worked with Ketchum Change, we put together a roadmap. And the roadmap helped us communicate with the CEO and the executive committee on where we needed to go and what we needed to do. And we looked out, I think it was 7 years. And basically, we've got actions identified through 7 years that we want to roll out. And so that was it was a great exercise, number one, to really look at where we were weak, to assess our organization, understand where our weaknesses were, but to also recognize that we can't take everything on all at once. Global organization, yes. You say matrix, I say we're too small to be matrix. We're just, everybody's doing everything. We're actually probably the leanest automotive PR organization for a full line manufacturer in the industry. So it's more that we're doing everything. And so when you come into the office, you're the firefighter, or you're the strategist, whatever's required. So the change element was a great communication device, and it really showed the management team how serious we were and how much rigor we had put into the full analysis and how we were looking forward.
Fantastic. Sorry, I need to stop there. Thanks to Jeff, Catherine, and Francesc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.